Deepfaking Sam Altman is a verité documentary with a sci-fi comedic twist. The film becomes a sharp and surprisingly moving exploration of how we're all trying to navigate the chaotic new world of artificial intelligence and what happens when the answers that we seek can't or won't come from their human source. All of that is true. We're talking about the film Deepfaking Sam Altman, and we're joined today by the director, Adam Bhala Lough. Adam, welcome to Cinemaphile.
Thanks for having me.
Again, in addition to being such an incredibly important topic that, in my mind, has gotten barely a open forum. Let's talk about this before we get too far down this road. Political, social, you name it, on every level of society, and how little has actually been talked about the ramifications of it. This is one aspect of it. I'm so glad you tackled this part of it. Tell me a little bit about the inspiration behind deepfaking Sam Altman.
I've been deeply inspired by AI since I was a little kid, and I first saw the movie Terminator 2. Honestly, I would not be a filmmaker if it wasn't for that film. I saw it when I was in second grade in the theater, and it really just like changed the trajectory of my life. I think it's a masterpiece. Got me into filmmaking, but also got me into really into AI and this idea of like robots taking over and becoming our friends. And so that was the initial inspiration with deepfaking Sam Altman was going back to my childhood, really.
And you can see how that plays out. This film, in some ways, faintly, this reminds me of Roger and Me, Michael Moore's first documentary film, in that he was seeking answers to questions that he had so far, and most people had not been given the answer to. And that's how it feels related to what you're doing here with this film. Is that a fair analogy?
Yeah, I mean, it's also I think obvious parallel is that he's seeking answers from the CEO of a giant corporation that won't talk to him, which is the exact same in my case.
For the audience who may or may not know who Sam Altman is, let's talk about who he is and his importance to AI.
Sam Altman is the CEO of OpenAI, and OpenAI is the company behind ChatGPT, which is an AI that has changed the world and become, I believe it was one of the most downloaded apps in history when it was first released. And it has become an integral part of our lives in such an incredibly short period of time that it's astonishing. So Sam Altman through this company, and believe me, they're working on a lot of other products as we speak, is really one of the few people in the country right now who's ferrying us as humans into the future.
So you would describe it for someone who somehow has been living, in the forest for the last year or two. How would you describe the ramifications? In other words, is in some ways it's an answer to all of your questions in terms of practical questions as well as even esoteric questions. It is artificial intelligence brought to the masses in that's how I see it. Again, is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, I would say that it's artificial intelligence for the masses. It's a game changer. I think it's hard to describe how much of a game changer it is and it's going to be because it seems like an exaggeration, but it's totally true. So if somebody was just like had been living under a rock, I feel like they would have a hard time believing that something like this just exists from the time that they've been living under this rock and they came out and then boom, to the point where I hear people referring to this era as the post ChatGPT era, as if before this was it was a whole other era.
Well, what does that mean in terms of, you mean in terms of the integration of AI into our lives or in the existence of this particular kind of data processing world that it represents? What is that? What is the context for that?
It's similar to internet and pre-internet. So,
Okay.
if you remember a time And you know, actually these things are quite similar, AI and the internet, because the internet actually has been around for a long time. It's just
Right.
that people didn't have access to it, and it didn't consume our lives in the same way back in the 70s and 80s. I remember the first time I got on the internet, I was in second grade, and it was really early on, and it was only because one of my best friend's mom was a sports reporter for the Washington Post. So she had access to this thing called the internet that gave her sports scores and news before anyone else got it. I remember getting on it and like not really understanding like what this thing was, but having a feeling that this was something big. AI has also been around for a long time, but it's only been, you know, a tool of the masses to the degree that it is now for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So I think that there's the way to explain it is really to draw parallels with the internet, looking at life before the internet existed and life afterwards and how everything has changed.
As I alluded to in the introduction, and that is that there are schools of thought in terms of, what this means for basically the first world. Because in some ways, I don't think that AI, in terms of the ability to interact with it, to raise rising tide lifts all boats, I don't think that's going to be the case in this world. I do think there's going to be a very deep divide between first world, maybe second world, and the rest of the world in terms of accessibility and the impact that it would have on individuals. That doesn't mean it won't have an impact on their lives. And this gets me to another question which you ask in this film. And basically, what is it going to mean for people who don't have access? Where are they going to end up in terms of essentially their viability in this world that we're moving into?
It's bad news for people who don't have access, for people who are poor in third world countries. I think that we have a responsibility to change that. We need to do something about that. It's to our benefit that we do something about that, because if not, there will be a reckoning coming. And so similar with the internet too. I think we don't give Al Gore and Bill Clinton enough credit. The internet would be a very different thing if it wasn't for them. I think they very early on recognized that it needed to be something more like a public utility, like water and gas and electricity. If it wasn't for them, we'd be living in a very different landscape. So artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, all this stuff needs to be democratized. And it is to our benefit that that happens. If it's just hoarded and the power is just wielded by very few people, there will be a reckoning in the future. We don't want that to happen.
The film is called Deepfaking Sam Altman, and we're joined today by the director and producer. You have a number of hats you wear in this film, Adam Bhala Lough. And it does get to another question, and it's more, I don't know if it's more esoteric, but it certainly is something that has been bothering me for the last year, at least, maybe 2 years, that everyone's been talking about this coming new way of essentially navigating through society, our ability to acquire wealth, all kinds of seismic changes in society. And yet there's been very little reflection on, as you were just describing, how it's going to be introduced into the world, what it's going to mean for people who, in certain job fields, certain places in our society that look to be basically on the end of that, their ability to make a living. And we're not having these sort of broader political and social discussions about it. How is that going to manifest itself, or is it going to manifest itself in an open discussion among politicians, leadership, whatever it might be, industrial leadership, companies? How is it? How is it, or are we even going to have this conversation, in your opinion?
Look, I would hope that we would be having this conversation. I don't think that we will. I think that there's a small amount of politicians like Bernie Sanders and some of his ilk that are talking about this kind of stuff and are aware of this stuff, but there aren't enough Bernie Sanders, sadly. I think the we've already seen that the Trump administration has cozied up to Silicon Valley and to Altman and his ilk and are essentially making backroom deals to
Yeah.
do exactly what you just said, you know, and to hoard it all for themselves. And that's what's happening at the moment. And so I'm not very optimistic about that.
I mean, if people needed a visual reference, all they have to do is go to the inauguration of Donald Trump in the Capitol and see sitting behind him were five or six of the richest people in the world. And they were all more or less, I believe all of them were related in some way or another to the internet, online, Facebook, whatever it is, to this world. That's what their connection was and why they were sitting there. And also his the recent decision on the Trump administration's part to essentially not allow states to be able to regulate the industry in a way that's going to have a deep impact on so many states and for so many different reasons. So to your point, instead of trying to at least begin a conversation, it seems that we're running away from any even an attempt to have this conversation. And again, this is incredibly important to us as human beings moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's obvious that those who hold power in the country want to hold this power to themselves. That's just obvious. We need to take that power back by any means necessary.
And that's one of the great things about deep faking Sam Altman is you pose these questions in ways that are essentially accessible, entertaining in some ways to sort of begin the conversation, stimulate our minds to begin to wrap our heads around it. Because there's a number of scenes in the film where people, even the thought of crossing Sam Altman in some way, as this film in some ways does, is just you can see the fear in the eyes of some of the people that you're talking to about even broaching, this approach. So I think that says a lot in the film about what we're facing.
Yeah, Silicon Valley, the Bay Area it's a small community, it's a small
Yeah.
town. Everybody knows each other. They're very afraid to rock the boat. And that's what I discovered. I think if you watch the film, I think part of the comedy is me as a fish out of water going into the Bay Area, going into this AI world and not knowing what I'm doing and not understanding the rules that everybody plays by there, making
Yeah.
mistakes and then very quickly realizing like, oh, people behave a certain way here for a certain reason, money, right? Job security. And I guess just fear too of being ostracized. So nobody wanted to talk about Sam Altman. Nobody wanted to create this LLM for me. Nobody wanted to work with me at all. So I had to go to India.
Yeah, well, we have Kara Swisher who is in the film who has there's that's sort of a connection to that inner circle of Sam Altman. But in some ways, and again, this is maybe a tad philosophical, but in some ways, this is kind of keeping with a corporate mentality because technically, according to the law, corporations are people. Now, that's a fallacy as far as I'm concerned. They're immortal, essentially. They could be, which immediately, in my mind, disqualifies them as being "quote unquote" humans, and that they are in the eyes of the court. Corporations are people, and this feels like it's in that same continuum of the way we look at business and the way we look at people who are responsible for socially challenging and certainly socially groundbreaking technologies like this. Am I being too harsh?
No, I've heard that before, obviously, that in the eyes of the law, corporations are people and they also have a certain amount of free speech
Civil
and
rights, yeah.
civil rights. And that's interesting. And I didn't never thought about that in the context of this film and OpenAI in general, but that's I think that you make a good point.
Well, thank you. I'll end on that. I'll quit while I'm ahead. The film is really entertaining. I hope that I've conveyed that. It is, and I really just very quickly, the reaction that you're getting from people, maybe from the Bay Area or outside the Bay Area, how are you being received in terms of the film and its intentions?
It's pretty early on. We've had a half dozen screenings, and so it's a little early to tell. We haven't yet had the Bay Area screening, which I'm really excited to do and get a reaction out of them. But I will I'll let you know
Okay.
how it goes.
I may be up there, actually. I might be in the area around the time. Well, let me let people know that the film opens at the Laemmle NoHo Theater here in Los Angeles on January 30th, and it will be followed by a theatrical rollout. So really, truly be looking for this. As I said, not only entertaining, but it really goes kind of to the heart of this whole idea of AI, the people who create it, and what are their intentions, and also to watch AI in motion, in everyday life of your life, in terms of the creation of that Sam Altman bot. It is jarring to say the least, and I think it will cause a lot of people to think this through a little bit more than they maybe have in the past. I certainly hope so. So congratulations on that.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Again, the film is called Deep Faking Sam Altman. We joined today by the director, Adam Bhala Lough. Thank you for so much, and thank you. Come back anytime. Really look forward to more of your work. It's been amazing resume so far, and I look forward to more from you. So, Adam, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. I'll definitely come back
All
whenever
right.
you can have me.